let me tell you what happened. It's not just about the money. For example, what starts happening is that the locals will start the collusion. I started talking about collusion. The locals will start saving and putting aside the locally priced rentals for their own. They didn't do it before, but because, you know, within the culture, it starts becoming common knowledge that foreigners pay this much, let's say $1,000. It starts becoming part of the landscape that, oh, well, foreigners pay that much. What are you doing looking at this rental for $300? The world can get you down. Don't get yourself into too much wine or anything. This is just Jamaica tea. Very antioxidant and full of vitamin C. We need that, according to folklore. No, we need vitamin C. But I don't know how it is, Angie, that we always end up at the beach. How do we end up at the beach? Sooner or later, we end up at the beach. So, we're talking about, like, I've mentioned two couples, and there's like another couple that went to Portugal. We retired to Portugal, blah, blah, blah. I think Angie was telling me that they're going back to the US. Isn't that true? That couple that retired from California, retired early to Portugal, and they're going back to the States. Yeah, and they made all kinds of videos about look at what you can get for $200,000 in Portugal. And of course, in Portugal, people make 600 euros a month. Just saying though, you know, I mean, these are the videos, and I'm not trying to say that nothing they say has any value. I'm not trying to say that at all. I'm just saying that you do have to put things in perspective. We really need to put things in the proper perspective nowadays more than ever. You know, we need to really give some thought and be diligent about how we do things, but we can still do them. We can still do them. For example, you know, it's not just about money. For example, we lived in Cuenca, Ecuador, in the bubble of Cuenca, Ecuador, and at the time we were helping expats. We were helping Americans and Canadians and such get locally priced rentals, which is a good work. It's a good thing to do, help people do that. Because I tell you what happened after being abroad 10 years, which we have been. We've been abroad 10 years, and we've been right in the middle of a really highly touted area that was in the middle of the best place to retire in the world. We lived through that, and what we saw was the transformation, and I think there's a word for it. The word is gentrification. The gentrification of the locals. And what that means is that the locals get pushed out of their own economy, their own neighborhoods, and their own lives. And yes, there is a certain percentage of them that profit off of it, but there's a much larger percentage that don't, and it's hurtful to them. It's very, very hurtful to them. And what happens is that by default, you start getting a sort of collusion atmosphere from the locals. You can't blame them for it. It's just self-preservation. You can start getting collusion, and I saw it happening in Cuenca, Ecuador. I saw it go from locals being super happy that all these foreigners were coming in and paying them all this money for the real estate, and all the real estate agents were making all this money, to all of a sudden the market getting overtaken by it, and all of a sudden now the locals no longer being able to afford their own rents. And you can see it because they start putting ads looking for, apartment or house in this price range, and it's local price range, because they can't find it. And so what happens to people like us, and a lot of people that watch our channel that are making things happen on a budget. And you see, on a budget, I don't really like the word budget. What's budget about this? Does this look like a budget? You know, I don't like the word budget, but just for simplification of the conversation, okay? You know, we don't have an unlimited budget, okay? So we work within our means. And so we kind of fall into this category that's kind of, and I'm telling you this in case you're in that category, we fall into this category where all of a sudden, if we go where all these expats are going, we end up like the locals that get gentrified. So the locals get gentrified, but so do we. Let me tell you what happened. It's not just about the money. For example, what starts happening is that the locals will start the collusion. I started talking about collusion. The locals will start saving and putting aside the locally priced rentals for their own. They didn't do it before, but because, you know, within the culture, it starts becoming common knowledge that foreigners pay this much, let's say $1,000. It starts becoming part of the landscape that, oh, well, foreigners pay that much. What are you doing looking at this rental for $300? That's for my compatriots, you know. They're not going to rent to you. And so what happens is you get discriminated against. So you fall into the cracks, you fall into this category that, you know, you're not one of those that's going to pay $1,000 or $1,500 in rent like the Californians do in Mexico and in a lot of places in Mexico, in a lot of places abroad, actually, even in Portugal, and a lot of places that have been named, you know, best place to retire, where you get just this huge amount of people. I'm telling you this for a reason, because there's more to it than money. So you end up getting, you know, when this plays itself out, you end up being in this category where all of a sudden you get discriminated and you can't get a rental. It's not, I mean, there aren't any, and the ones there are, the locals save them for the locals. And they figure, well, you're a foreigner. They don't understand foreigner on their budget, because they've seen, you know, all the other foreigners, they're all paying, you know, the $1,000 to $1,500. So that you must be one of those, you know. Well, you're a foreigner, you must be one of those. Go get one of those apartments. You get this kind of a caste system, kind of the system where you're either one of these foreigners that pays huge rents, or you can't get a rental. It's not that you can't find them. You find them, but they won't rent them to you. They won't rent to you. And so even if you say, well, I'll just pay the higher rent. For example, in Italy, when we were in Italy, they wouldn't rent to me because they figured if they think you're a local, they won't rent to you because they don't trust the locals. So it's just a really strange situation. Each market is different depending on where you're going. And again, you know, if you're in that category that $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month to you is a bargain, you know, from big city America, and I know that it's getting expensive there in America, but believe me when I tell you, a lot of these foreigner enclaves abroad, especially in places like Mexico or any place where the Retire Abroad media and magazine has been and named it best place to retire, including Portugal, any of these places, they become higher priced than, how to call it, middle America. I mean, you know. It can be discouraging for somebody that is just, I mean, you know, just a smart, frugal person. You could be a smart, frugal person, right? Really good at ferreting stuff out and everything like we are, right? But if you end up in an area that is really overwhelmed with foreigners, which are, you know, right now, I'll tell you, you know, it can be very challenging. It can be very, very challenging. There are still solutions, but it can be very challenging. You know, for some of us, really the best solution is to spend half the time in our own countries and you know, maybe half the time abroad. And for others, it's better to just make a 100% commitment and buy property. You know, I mean, once you buy your own property, you're not really subject to landlords and whether they'll rent to you or not, and then you know, discrimination and all that. So you just have to decide, do you like a place well enough? And that's another thing, you can't really make a decision. And that's why I mentioned about these people that make these videos about, look at my wonderful apartment, look at my great life, look how much I can get for $200,000 in Portugal. But then a few months later, you're seeing them making a video, we're going back home. Why we're not in Mexico, why we're leaving Portugal, why we're, you know, I mean, it's funny, it's hilarious. And so, you know, it really does take, you know, time and experience to decide what lifestyle you build for yourself abroad, and to know everything there is to know, you know, about being abroad, because really it's not something you can get. And I did it, I went through it. You know, I used to read travel blogs and, you know, and watch videos and all that. I used to do all that. I still do it for entertainment purposes and to be able to talk intelligently.
And we appreciate you being on this channel. And if you can stand it, if you can stand the other side of the story, check out the rest of our video library. And thanks for coming.
Alright, so thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a wonderful day.